Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. We're so close to 30,000 subs, and you can make that possible. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories. The first time I came across Anise's profile, it was way past midnight. I was sitting on the floor in my kitchen, eating dry cereal straight from the box because I couldn't be bothered to wash a bowl. Her pictures weren't like the typical filtered glam shots I usually saw on dating apps. She looked real. In every photo, she was wearing scrubs, like mid-shift selfies with her hair tied back, or pictures of takeout food in her car with captions like, "Another glamorous hospital dinner." There was one with a dog filter, which normally would have annoyed me, but it kind of made her seem down to earth. Her bio said she was a 27-year-old nurse, overworked and undercaffeinated, who loved horror movies, hated yoga, and once cried in public over a vending machine stealing her dollar. It was weirdly specific, and I liked that. We matched instantly. She messaged me first, which almost never happens, and the message was simple. "So what cereal are you eating right now?" It was weird, but also strangely on point, because I actually was eating cereal. From that moment, it felt like we just clicked. She was funny in a really dry, almost sarcastic way, but not mean. And she did go from talking about movies to venting about how hard hospital life was, and I'd just be listening for hours. We didn't do calls right away, just messages and voice notes. Her voice was always calm, soft, kind of low. She said she had to keep her tone quiet because of hospital walls being thin and night shifts being a thing. Eventually, we moved to video calls. Every single time we video chatted, she wore a surgical mask, like full on. I asked about it, obviously, and she said it was because she was on hospital property most of the time, even during breaks. She said there were strict policies and cameras, and if she got caught without PP while on a call, even in the break room, it could cause issues. I didn't really question it much beyond that. She'd angle the camera so I could only see part of her face and sometimes just her eyes, which were always a bit shadow or tired. It wasn't ideal, but it didn't seem that crazy considering what she claimed to do for work. We kept this going for almost 3 months. We talked nearly every day. She'd tell me stories about weird patients, hospital politics, how burnt out she felt, and I'd just listen. I felt kind of honored she was opening up to me. She sent photos too, always in scrubs, always with a mask on. I'd send her dumb stuff from my day, memes, bad haircuts, my cat doing something weird. I started to feel like I actually knew her, like we were getting somewhere. Eventually, I suggested we meet in person. I said I could grab coffee near her hospital and she could swing by on a break. She was hesitant at first, said her schedule was chaotic. I backed off. A week later, she told me she had a rare day off coming up and that we could finally meet. She picked a small cafe in a part of town I didn't go to much. Old buildings, kind of run down, but still trendy in that gentrified kind of way. When I got there, I waited outside for a while. I texted her and she said that she was already inside. I went in scanning the tables. There was no one in scrubs, no masked nurse. Just a guy sitting alone in the back waving at me. I thought he was just being friendly, so I walked past him. But he said my name. My full name. That's when I stopped. He was in his mid-40s, wearing a hoodie and these huge headphones around his neck. He looked nothing like Anise. He pointed at the seat across from him and said he'd explain. I didn't sit. I didn't even know what to say. He told me that he was Anise, that it had all been him the whole time. He said he wasn't trying to be cruel, but that he ran a podcast, something about online relationships, digital personas, emotional dependency. He said he used our interactions as part of the segment he was preparing on emotional connection through false identity. He said he wore the mask and used a distorted voice filter during video calls. I started to feel sick. He went on and on about his project, how it helped him prove something about vulnerability and fantasy in the digital age. I didn't even hear most of it. I was trying to piece together how I missed all the signs. He showed no remorse. In fact, he was proud of what he'd done. He even mentioned that he might change my name when he aired the episode unless I was okay with it. I walked out. I didn't say a word to him. I just left. I didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to punch anyone, didn't want to scream. I just left and didn't look back. That walk back to my car was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Every step felt heavier than the last. It wasn't even anger. It was this weird feeling of being cracked open, like someone had crawled into my life without me noticing and rearranged things just to see how I'd react. I deleted all our messages that night, wiped the voice notes, blocked the number. It didn't make it go away, though. I kept thinking about the conversations we had. All the things I told Anisa, the stuff I never even told my actual friends. How easy it had been to believe someone just because they sounded kind and knew what to say. I stopped using dating apps for a while after that. I didn't tell anyone the full story. I said we just didn't click in person. But every time I think back to that night, I remember standing in that cafe doorway, hearing my name from someone I'd never seen before, and realizing I'd spent 3 months talking to a stranger pretending to be someone who didn't even exist. When I matched with Javed, I was on the elliptical pretending to work out, but mostly just avoiding actual cardio. His profile felt kind of intimidating, not gonna lie. It was all gym mirror selfies, perfect lighting, protein shakes, and that one classic photo guys always have where they're holding a big fish for some reason. He said he was a personal trainer, 32, and based in my city. His bio was short and confident, just said, building better people with a dumb little flexing emoji. Normally I'd swipe left on that kind of stuff, but I don't know, something about him seemed grounded. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly laid back, not overly into gym talk like I expected. He'd ask what kind of music I was into or what I usually did on weekends. Said he worked weird hours because of training sessions, but liked to unwind with cooking and old kung fu movies. That threw me off a bit, in a good way. He said he used to do kickboxing, but stopped after an injury and now mostly stuck to weights and helping clients with recovery. Honestly, I was kind of impressed. We talked for a week straight before even swapping numbers. Once we started texting, things moved fast. He was super responsive, not in a love bomby way, just consistent. Sent good morning messages, asked how my day went, remembered random stuff I told him. We FaceTimed a couple times and his voice matched his pictures. Calm, deep, reassuring. Every time we talked, he was either in a car or what looked like a home gym. He said he bounced between client houses and sometimes did mobile sessions for people with anxiety or postpartum issues. Sounded legit. After about 2 weeks, we made plans to meet. He offered to cook at his place, but I wasn't ready for that, so we met at this chill Mediterranean spot downtown. I got there first and waited by the window. He texted that he was parking. When I saw someone walking toward the door, I didn't recognize him. At all. He was older, like maybe late 30s, heavier, kind of a tired look in his eyes. I figured he was just another diner. Then he waved at me. I didn't wave back. I froze. He walked up and said my name like we'd known each other for years. My stomach dropped. I was expecting the guy from the pictures, a toned, sharp-jawed gym poster kind of dude. This man looked like he hadn't seen the inside of a gym in years. I didn't even respond at first, just stood there. He said quietly that he needed to explain, and that it was okay if I left, but he hoped I wouldn't. I didn't leave. I don't know why. Probably because my brain was still trying to figure out what the hell was happening. We sat down, and he started talking like he rehearsed it. He said his name really was Javed, but none of the photos were him. They were some fitness influencer he used to follow. He said he wasn't a personal trainer. He'd never been one. He'd been in prison for about 6 years and had gotten out a year ago. The gym photos were stolen. The stories, the schedule, the mobile training, all fake. He told me that after getting out, dating apps were the only way he felt like he could interact with normal people again. That was how he put it. He said the idea of walking up to someone in public felt impossible now. So he made up a version of himself he thought people would want to know. Someone who was healthy, responsible, stable. Someone whose life was structured and positive. He looked at me and said that the version of himself I got to know wasn't completely fake. It was just him at his best in theory. I didn't know what to say. He wasn't trying to flirt now. He wasn't trying to keep up the lie. He wasn't even asking for forgiveness. He was just sitting across from me, totally calm, kind of resigned. He told me he used dating apps just to feel like he was part of something again. That he didn't want to be alone, but he didn't know how to be honest either. It was so much to take in and weirdly quiet in the restaurant, like even the music had faded out. I sat there thinking about every single message we'd exchanged. Every joke, every compliment, every plan, and how none of it came from the person I thought I was talking to. But at the same time, it did. And that was the weirdest part. He was the same person behind the screen, just not the one in the pictures. Not the one he claimed to be, but still the one who sent those texts. It made my brain twist in ways I didn't like. He didn't push me to stay longer. After a while, he said he understood if I blocked him and never wanted to speak again. He said he deleted the photos and that I wasn't the only one he'd talked to, but I was the only one he'd actually met. That part hit differently. I asked him why me, and he shrugged and said I just felt like someone who might not run away right away. Like maybe I'd give him a chance to be real for once. I didn't give him that chance. I left shortly after. No big goodbye, no drama. I just thanked him for being honest, even if it came way too late. On the way home, I remember staring out the bus window, trying not to cry in front of strangers. Not because I was heartbroken or anything, but because I felt weirdly used and weirdly not. Like he made me into a mirror for a version of himself he wanted to believe could exist. And that somehow made everything feel faker than if he'd just been scamming me for money or something. I blocked his number the next morning, deleted our chats. I thought about reporting the profile, but it was already gone. Like he knew it was over before I even did. I don't know if he kept doing it with other people or if I was the last one. I don't really care. I haven't gone back on that app since. I still think about him sometimes, not a missing him kind of way, just in a what the hell was that kind of way. Like I accidentally walked into someone else's story and got stuck in the wrong role. Anyway, that's it. Okay, this one is funny. I met Molly on a Sunday evening when I was absolutely not in the mood for anything. I'd just gotten back from visiting my parents. My laundry pile was leaning like the Tower of Pisa, and I was scrolling just to distract myself. Her profile was simple, 2 photos, both casual. One in a bookstore with her hair covering half her face, the other of her sitting cross-legged on a picnic blanket, sipping what looked like iced tea. No filters, no try-hard captions. Her bio said something like, just trying to feel like a human again, followed by a leaf emoji. That line stuck with me. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the honesty of it. Maybe I'd just like the idea of someone else feeling as emotionally flatlined as I did. We matched, and she messaged first. She said the leaf was from her favorite tea brand, which sounded like a weird flex, but actually made me laugh. Our conversation flowed easily. She had this dry humor that didn't feel forced, and she wasn't trying to impress me with any performative deep thoughts or wild travel stories. She said she was recovering from a rough relationship and was just taking things slow, focusing on herself. I could respect that. It felt good to talk to someone who wasn't trying to rush into anything. Over the next week, we kept chatting. Nothing heavy, just normal stuff. Music we liked, weird food combinations, what we did for work. She worked in interior design and said she was trying to get back into painting. She sent me a picture of a sketch she was working on, a messy little line drawing of a dog with 2 long legs. It was charming. She made fun of it, but I thought it was cool. There was a softness to her, even in the way she typed. You know when someone texts and you can just feel they aren't pretending. That's how it felt with her. We met in person after 10 days of talking. Coffee at this tiny spot with mismatched chairs and an old jukebox that didn't work. She was even more comfortable in person. Not dressed up, no makeup that I could tell, just jeans and a hoodie. We talked for 2 hours just sitting there, refilling our mugs until they gave us that polite, please leave glance. There was no awkward pause, no dead air. It didn't feel like a first date. It felt like a 5th or 6th, like we'd known each other already and just picked up where we left off. We didn't kiss that day. She said she wasn't quite there yet. I didn't push it. Honestly, I didn't care. I just liked being around her. Over the next couple of weeks, we kept seeing each other. Nothing wild. Coffee, bookstore wandering, groceries together once because we both needed milk and chips. There was something really grounding about how normal she made things feel. Like I didn't have to keep up with some weird online dating performance art. She was just there, present, kind of a safe space in human form. But then little things started adding up. Not huge red flags, just weird moments. She never invited me to her place, said it was in shambles from renovations. She never stayed over, even though we'd started cuddling on the couch during movie nights, and I knew she lived less than 10 minutes away. She'd always leave by midnight, no matter what. She was constantly texting someone, even while we were hanging out. But she never seemed secretive about it, just said it was her best friend going through a breakup. One night we were at my place watching something dumb, and she got a call. Her face changed immediately, tense, serious. She said it was her mom and stepped outside to take it. She was gone for almost 20 minutes. When she came back in, she looked spaced out and said she needed to leave. She hugged me tight, like tighter than usual, then left without really explaining. That was when I started to feel that buzzing feeling in the back of my brain, like something wasn't sitting right. 2 days later, I was at this food market downtown and I saw her. At least I thought I did. She was with a guy, tall, bearded, wearing a flannel. They weren't holding hands or anything, but they looked like they came together. I kind of froze. I didn't go up to her, just watched from behind a display of overpriced apples like a total creep. She looked happy, relaxed. He picked up a bottle of wine, and she leaned in close to say something to him, laughing in a way I hadn't seen before. I didn't say anything to her that day. I didn't know if I was being paranoid or just insecure. That night, I asked her about her weekend, and she said she spent it organizing her art supplies and helping her friend move. No mention of the guy of the market. That's when I started digging. Nothing dramatic, just basic online curiosity. Her Instagram was private, but I found an old tagged post from someone who seemed like a friend. In the caption, it mentioned Molly and Jake's epic Halloween costume with a color foil. I clicked the tag. Jake's page was public, and there they were, dozens of photos, some recent, some old. All of them together. One post stood out, just a week old. A selfie of them on their couch with a pizza box, the caption saying, "Nothing like movie night with my favorite person." The date? Same night she said she was watching TV at home and texting me the whole time. I felt like the bottom dropped out of my stomach. I didn't confront her right away. I waited until we met up again. We were walking around a park and I asked casually if she was still in contact with her ex. She hesitated. That pause told me everything before she even said a word. She looked down and said, "I should probably be honest about something." And then she told me. She was married, had been for a few years. They weren't separated. They lived together. He knew she was dating online. According to her, he encouraged it. Said it made her feel seen again. Said it helped her heal from the rough past they'd had. She said they had an understanding, and that she'd never lied about who she was emotionally, just situationally. I didn't say anything. I just sat down on a park bench and stared out at the water. She sat beside me, not touching me, just quiet. I think she expected me to yell or freak out, but I didn't have the energy. I just felt deflated. Like I'd been walking through what felt like something real only to find out it was just a hallway in someone else's house. A place I didn't belong. She apologized, said she really did care about me, which almost made it worse. That she liked our connection and didn't know how to let it go even though it was built on something false. I didn't know what to do with that. So I stood up and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if she stayed on the bench or followed me. I didn't block her. I didn't delete anything. I just left everything where it was and didn't go back. I met Kian on a Wednesday night while I was supposed to be answering emails for work, but ended up doom scrolling on my phone instead. His profile looked sharp but not flashy. Just enough polish to seem like he had his life together without trying too hard. He said he ran his own marketing agency, specialized in branding for startups, and loved helping ideas grow, whatever that meant. I didn't even fully buy it, but I was curious. His photos were all clean cut, one in a blazer with a skyline behind him, another in a cafe with a laptop and espresso, and one with a dog that may or may not have been his. His messages were smooth right off the bat, but not in a cringy way. He was just confident. Said he was busy but liked making time for good conversations. We talked about random stuff at first, how overpriced cold brew had gotten, why everyone on dating apps claims to love deep conversations, and which TV shows actually held up over time. He was funny, quick, and surprisingly self-aware. I asked about his business and he gave this whole thing about how he started consulting after leaving a toxic agency job, how he built his network from scratch, how he loved mentoring young entrepreneurs. It sounded rehearsed, but not fake. I figured he was just used to pitching himself. After about a week of chatting, we met for lunch. He picked this trendy spot tucked into a corner of a co-working space. Super industrial vibes. Exposed brick, overpriced sandwiches, you know the type. He looked exactly like his pictures. Well-dressed, clean-shaven, kind of that startup chic aesthetic. He ordered tea, which he explained was because he had quit caffeine as a discipline thing, which made me roll my eyes but not in a bad way. He told me about one of his clients, a bakery startup, that he helped with logo design and social media growth. The way he spoke about marketing made it sound almost noble, which is a talent on its own. Over the next few weeks, we kept seeing each other. Not constantly, but enough to build some rhythm. He'd invite me to these cool little networking mixers that felt more like parties with people in blazers. He'd always introduce me as his friend with a sharp eye for detail, even though I never said anything remotely clever in those rooms. I figured it was just his way of making me feel included. He never pushed anything. He never tried to make it serious too fast. Honestly, he made dating feel kind of exciting again. Then one night, we were hanging out in his apartment, small but spotless, the kind of place where everything has its place and smells faintly like eucalyptus. He started talking about something new he was working on. Said it was a passion project, a business opportunity that could change everything. He seemed really hyped. I was expecting some new client or a cool campaign idea, but instead, he pulled out a glossy pamphlet from a drawer. It was for a wellness brand I'd never heard of, the kind that sells protein powders, supplements, skincare, and those weird vitamin patches. I thought he was showing it to me because he had landed them as a client. But no, he said he had recently partnered with them. He launched into this whole explanation about how it wasn't just a product, it was a lifestyle. How it was about building generational wealth, about residual income, of becoming your own boss. I realized mid-sentence that I was sitting in what was basically a pitch. At first, I thought he was just excited about a side hustle. But then he started showing me charts, numbers, recruitment levels, a literal pyramid diagram that he tried to explain away as tiered marketing strategy. I sat there in silence while he laid it all out like he was unveiling a secret to happiness. He even said, "I don't normally share this with people so soon, but I think you'd be amazing at it." I laughed at first, not like mockingly, just out of disbelief. I asked him if this was why he matched with me, if this whole dating thing was just a lead generation tactic. He brushed it off, said he genuinely liked me, and that this was something he shared with people he trusted. He called it a test of vision. Said most people wouldn't understand because they weren't ready to break out of the employee mindset. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like a TED Talk if the speaker had taken away too many motivational quotes off Pinterest. I asked if he was even running a real agency. He said yes, but when I pushed for details, like a website, client list, anything tangible, he got vague. Said most of his work was referral only, which is code for you can't Google me. My brain started stitching everything together. The mixers, the sudden change in tone, the way he always talked about financial freedom but never about actual campaigns. He wasn't building a brand, he was recruiting. I didn't yell or storm out. I just said I wasn't interested, that I wasn't trying to date someone who saw people as future downlines. He tried to backtrack, said he still wanted to see me outside of the opportunity. But it was too late. I couldn't unsee it. Every conversation started to feel transactional, like he just said whatever he needed to say to get me to that couch, to that pamphlet, to that sales pitch. He texted a few more times after that. Said he missed talking. Sent me a link to a Zoom info session one night with a message that said, "No pressure, just come check it out." I didn't reply. I watched the typing bubbles pop up and disappear a few times before they stopped altogether. I looked him up later out of curiosity. His name came up on a few Reddit threads warning people about fake marketing recruiters using dating apps to find business-minded partners. It wasn't just me. He had a whole system. Get close, build trust, slide in the pitch. I wasn't even the first to fall for it. It's wild how polished people can seem when they know exactly how to sell an idea, and how easily getting to know someone can turn into being softened up for a pitch. I still think about how normal he seemed, how carefully deconstructed everything to look legit. I wonder if he ever just talks to people without trying to convert them. If he knows what a real connection even feels like anymore. The entrepreneur who turned dating into a business strategy. So I met Lana on a rainy Thursday when I was stuck inside with a dying phone and no Wi-Fi. I was hotspotting off my laptop, watching YouTube videos about conspiracy theories and quietly spiraling about how little I'd accomplished that week. Swiping on a dating app felt like the laziest form of distraction, and that's when her profile popped up. First picture was of her at a bookstore, looking like someone straight out of a poetry zine. Second one was her on a rooftop at night, blurred lights behind her, and this huge, soft-looking coat wrapped around her. No filter, just kind of raw and interesting. Her bio was one sentence: I want to hear how you see the world. It wasn't even a cheesy line. It felt like something someone thoughtful would say, like she actually wanted to know, not just toss around quotes. I swiped right, we matched immediately, and she messaged within the hour. She asked me what the last thing I noticed but didn't tell anyone was, which is the kind of question that makes you pause. I remember replying with something dumb, like, my neighbor's dog only barks at one specific color of car. I figured that would be the end of it, but she loved it. Our conversation took off from there. Every message from her was a weird mix of deep and light, like she could talk about the concept of time and then pivot to asking whether cereal is soup. She'd text late at night, send quotes I'd never heard before, links to old articles about music theory, screenshots of old chatroom messages she found haunting. It wasn't flirtatious in the usual way. It was layered, like she was trying to build some kind of mental universe between us. After a week, I started to feel kind of hooked. Not in a dramatic I'm in love way, but in a this is actually interesting and not boring way. She asked good questions. She remembered small things I told her and brought them up again in totally new contexts. I hadn't even seen her in person yet, and she already felt more real than half the people I'd dated in real life. Every time I asked about meetings, she'd gently dodge it. Said she liked to take her time. That rushing into physical stuff ruined the mental rhythm. I sort of got it, but it also made me raise an eyebrow. I offered video calls. She declined. Said she hated seeing herself on screen, and that she preferred the freedom of just words. I was a little wary, but not enough to stop. I liked the vibe we had. It felt like this weird little secret tunnel we were building between our lives. She kept sending voice notes, though, always with music softly playing in the background, like jazz or weird experimental ambient stuff. Her voice was low, a little raspy. She laughed at her own pauses. She said, at the end of half her thoughts, like she needed to anchor herself. There was something magnetic about it, like she was letting you in while keeping one foot out the door. About 3 weeks in, she told me she wanted to try something. She asked if I'd be okay with writing her a letter, like a real one, on paper. Said she was doing this thing where she collected handwritten letters from people to understand how the written word changes when it's not digital. It sounded like something straight out of a college art course, but I agreed. I wrote her one. Nothing major, just about my week, some thoughts on dreams, a dumb drawing at the bottom. She gave me a P.O. box, which I thought was odd, but whatever. A week later, I got a response in the mail. A thick letter in loopy handwriting, with a dried leaf taped to the corner and a playlist scribbled on the back. It felt weirdly meaningful, like I was in a movie. I started writing more. She replied to each one. Some short, some long. Always thoughtful, always personal. We kept texting too, but the letters added this extra layer. Like we had a second life going on in slow motion while a fast-paced version buzzed in our phones. I told my roommate that I was talking to someone different. Someone interesting. Someone who made me feel like my brain was being used for once. Then came the day I found out. Total accident. I was meeting up with a friend from college, Jenna, who I hadn't seen in over a year. We were catching up at this cafe near campus. She had transferred schools midway through college to focus on sociology, and we were talking about her final research project. She said she'd been working on a study with a partner, some weird digital identity thing. I asked what it was about, just to be polite, and she casually said, "Well, we've been running a fake dating profile for 2 months to see how men open up emotionally in their artificial intimacy." My stomach did this slow rolling drop. I didn't even connect the dots right away. But then she said, "It's wild how fast some guys fall in love with just words. You don't even have to be flirty. You just have to sound curious." I laughed like a fake, awkward laugh and asked what they called the profile. She said, "Lana," with that same one-sentence bio. "I want to hear how you see the world." My brain just stopped. I asked who she ran it with. She said her classmate Aaron, who did the voice notes. She said he was great at mimicking different speaking styles and had a jazz musician cousin who helped with the background audio. They had a whole system. They kept track of their conversations in a spreadsheet. They color-coded emotional shifts. They used the letters as a secondary layer of analysis. Apparently, I had scored high on the engagement scale. I didn't tell her I was one of the subjects. I just nodded, sipped my drink, and acted like it was all fascinating. Inside, I felt this bizarre mix of humiliation, disbelief, and, if I'm being honest, disappointment. I wasn't even angry yet. I was just sitting there trying to wrap my head around the fact that the person I'd been getting close to wasn't even a person. She was a research project. I left early, said I had to take a call. I walked home and read through all of Lana's messages again. I kept looking for the moment where it should have clicked, the point where it was obvious, but it never was. That's what messed me up the most. It wasn't some fake profile run by a creep. It was two college students who knew exactly how to build trust and emotion with zero actual intimacy. I never confronted them. I just stopped replying. Deleted the texts, tore up the letters. I still think about it sometimes, mostly because it made me question how easily people can be manufactured. How much of connection is just rhythm and timing? How little we need to feel seen, and how quickly that can be exploited for someone else's experiment. I met Pedro during a heat wave when my apartment felt like a microwave and I was way too irritated to sleep. It was 2 in the morning. I was shirtless on the couch, sweating into the cushions and swiping through dating apps half out of boredom, half because I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. His profile was honestly kind of refreshing. No shirtless gym selfies or inspirational quotes. Just a few pics. One at a beach bonfire, one blurry one from a hiking trail, and one mirror pic that looked like it had been taken in a college dorm. He had this slightly crooked smile in every photo, like he was always about to laugh at something dumb. His bio was short. Just said, not great at apps, trying anyway. That felt honest. I matched with him, not expecting much, and he messaged me first, asking if I was surviving the heat. I replied that I had basically become a sweat-based life form, and somehow that turned into a 2-hour conversation about desert towns, heat stroke myths, and how neither of us had ever successfully kept a planet alive. Pedro was cool. Just chill, not trying too hard. He'd message in the morning, check in during the day, and send me dumb little videos he found online. He said he worked in logistics and hated how boring that sounded. Said he was the kind of person who got excited about organizing kitchen cabinets. I said he sounded like the villain in a minimalist documentary, and he told me that was the nicest insult he'd ever gotten. After a couple weeks, I felt I really knew him. We didn't talk about super deep stuff at first, just daily life, food we wanted to try, places we'd love to travel. Then it gradually shifted. He told me about growing up in a loud, chaotic family. How he always felt a little different from his siblings. That he had a twin brother, but they weren't close anymore. I didn't push for details, just figured it was one of those complicated family things. What made it feel real was the consistency. He wasn't love bombing or oversharing. He was just always there, like clockwork, but not in a clingy way, just solid. We moved to voice messages. His voice was low calm, had this easy rhythm to it. I liked listening to him talk, even when he was saying nothing special. There was one where he just described the weird old man who always sat outside his building and asked people about the moon. I listened to it like 3 times. After about 6 weeks, I finally asked if he wanted to meet. He said, yeah, definitely. Said he was just waiting until work wasn't crazy and promised we'd make it happen soon. I didn't want to be pushy, so I left it alone. But after 2 more weeks of the same soon answers, I started feeling like something was off. I wasn't mad, just confused. It didn't feel like he was ghosting me. It felt like he was circling around something. Then one afternoon, I was out with a friend at this small music festival in the park. We were sitting on the grass, eating overpriced tacos, when I saw someone who looked exactly like Pedro walk by. Like exactly. Same hair, same build, same vibe. But this guy didn't see me. He was walking with someone else, laughing. I almost called out to him, but something stopped me. I pulled out my phone, opened Pedro's profile, and stared at it. The guy I saw looked just like him. It had to be him. Later that night, I texted Pedro and casually asked if he'd ever been to that park. He replied, not really why, and said he'd been home all day catching up on laundry. I felt this weird twist in my gut. I didn't say anything else. I just sat with it. A few days later, he finally said he wanted to meet. Said he was ready and suggested we meet at this low coffee shop near downtown. I agreed. I got there early, waited at one of the outside tables. About 10 minutes later, someone walked up to me. I recognized the face immediately, but it wasn't Pedro. Not exactly. The guy standing in front of me looked like him, yeah, but something was different. His posture, his vibe, and the second he started talking, I knew. His voice was higher, faster, nervous. He smiled in a way that wasn't crooked at all. He sat down and just blurted it out. He said his name was Tyler, that the person I'd been talking to wasn't him, but kind of was. That it had actually been his twin brother Marcus, using his pictures. My brain short-circuited for a second. He explained that years ago, Marcus had gone through a really bad breakup. His girlfriend had left him for Tyler, or at least that's how Marcus saw it. Tyler said it wasn't that simple, but Marcus had never let it go. And apparently, this whole thing, our messages, all of it, was part of some weird plan Marcus had to prove something. Tyler didn't even know what's happening until a friend showed him the profile and recognized the photos. I asked him why he was the one meeting me. He said Marcus had backed out last minute, got cold feet, said he felt bad but didn't know how to end it. So he asked his own twin to go in his place and explain. That might have been the weirdest sentence I've ever heard in my life. I sat there trying to process it. All those messages, those voice notes, that slow, steady connection. I'd build all that with a guy pretending to be someone else, using his own brother's identity just to get some kind of weird revenge. Tyler didn't even seem that shocked. He said Marcus had done stuff like this before, not always with dating, but with people from their past. He liked to teach lessons, apparently. I didn't stay long. I left Tyler at the table with his cold espresso and didn't look back. The whole thing didn't even feel real until I got home and realized I'd deleted someone from my phone that never really existed. I kept wondering if Marcus ever felt anything at all during those late night chats. If he ever stopped pretending long enough to be a real person. Or the whole thing was just a game to him. That was Pedro, or Marcus, or Tyler, or whoever the hell I actually got to know. I met Kyle while waiting in line at the DMV. Not literally, but that's what it felt like. I was on the app, bored out of my mind, swiping like I was waiting for a number to be called. His profile showed up, and the first thing I noticed was a picture of him holding a little kid on his shoulders. Caption said, "Best part of my life right here." Normally, I'm cautious about profiles that mention kids because you never really know the full story. But something about the way he wrote about it didn't feel like a brag or bait, just a fact. Like, this is who I am. Kid's part of the deal. He had 3 more photos, one of him and the kid at a carnival, another with him holding a toolbox like he was mid-DIY project, and one where he was making some ridiculous face next to a plate of pancakes. His bio said, single dad, part-time handyman, full-time human. Not into games unless they're board games. I like that. It wasn't trying too hard. So I swiped right. We matched within minutes and he messaged right away. He asked if I liked waffles or pancakes better, and I made the mistake of answering waffles, which led to a playful debate that went on for an hour. He was easy to talk to. Chill but funny. Said he had a 6-year-old son, was co-parenting, but had full custody most weekends. Said he worked in maintenance for a few apartment buildings and did odd jobs on the side. He wasn't flashy, just straight up. What made me keep talking to him was how open he was. He'd text in the morning to say good luck on a meeting I mentioned. He'd send pictures of weird things he found on the job. Once it was a pair of mannequin legs in a dumpster. Just random stuff. But it made me laugh. He said he didn't have a lot of free time, but wanted to make sure we could carve something out if we were both feeling it. Our first date was a walk through this little farmer's market by the waterfront. He wore a flannel and jeans, looked exactly like his photos, and talked like someone who actually listened when people spoke. He didn't dominate the conversation, but he wasn't quiet either, just balanced. I liked that. We got lemonade, sat by the edge of the dock, and talked about our worst jobs. His was cleaning air ducts in fast food kitchens. Mine was a brief summer selling phone plans at kiosks inside malls. We laughed a lot that day. Second date, we got takeout and sat in his car watching people walk their dogs in the park. He told me more about his kid, what shows he liked, how he refused to eat anything green unless it was candy, how he once insisted a pennycomb was his new dad. The way Kyle talked about him, it didn't feel performative. It felt genuine. Like his life wasn't perfect, but he was showing up for it. Then came the third date. He said he wanted to show me this retro diner he loved and that his kid might tag along for the first few minutes until his sitter picked him up. I said okay. I figured I'd wave high, be polite, and that would be it. I didn't mind. If anything, I respected that he wasn't hiding the fact that he had responsibilities. I got there early and grabbed a booth. Kyle walked in 5 minutes later with someone trailing behind him. Definitely not a 6-year-old. The guy looked older than me, maybe 18 or 19, tall, awkward posture, wearing a hoodie pulled halfway over his face. I stood up, thinking maybe this was a nephew or something. Kyle gave me this weird smile and said, "Hey, this is my son." I laughed, confused, thinking it was a joke, but the other guy just nodded at me and sat down. I waited for Kyle to explain. He didn't. He ordered a milkshake. The other guy ordered a burger. I sat there trying to act normal, like my brain wasn't spinning. Finally, I asked, "So how old is your kid again?" And Kyle said, 18, just turned. I blinked. That was not what he told me at all. He looked straight at me and said, "Okay, I wasn't totally honest. I said he was younger because people get weird when they find out I'm gay. Or was gay, I guess. I'm trying to figure it out." I don't think I've ever felt so blindsided in my life. He explained that they weren't biologically related, that his son was actually his boyfriend. He said they'd been together for a while, but things weren't working. That he wanted something more stable, more traditional. He said he still cared about him, which was why he didn't just cut him off. So he brought him on the date to show him what he was trying to move toward, to help him let go. I couldn't process any of it, like not a single part made sense. He brought his current boyfriend, who he was calling his son now, to our date, so he could sort of wean him off the relationship, and thought I'd just go along with it. I didn't yell or storm off. I just said I needed some air and left the booth. I walked to the parking lot, sat on a curb, and just stared at the ground. He didn't follow me, didn't text either. That night, I kept replaying it over and over. I kept trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. The jokes, the messages, the late night photos of old takeout boxes and laundry piles, was any of it sincere? Or was I just a stepping stone in his attempt to flip his entire identity? I wasn't mad that he was figuring himself out. I get that. We're all a mess in our own way. But the way he roped me into it without warning, like I was supposed to be cool with whatever twist came next, that part messed me up. I never heard from him again. He unmatched me on the app, disappeared from my texts, which I guess was a blessing because I didn't even know how I'd respond. All I know is when someone tells you they got a kid, you don't expect them to walk into a diner with their full-grown boyfriend calling him their son like it's some kind of metaphor. I met Olivia in the comments of this random niche Reddit thread about sleep paralysis. I don't even remember what I wrote, but she replied with something sarcastic, and we kind of just kept chatting. We moved to DMs, then Instagram, then finally texting. She said she was studying to be a therapist and was doing her postgrad at some small private university I'd never heard of. She wasn't super open about the details, just kept it vague, like, yeah, it's in Northern California, kind of low-key, I like the professors. That kind of thing. I didn't think much of it. She seemed chill, had a dry sense of humor, and liked really weird indie horror films. That already put her above most people I'd talked to lately. We messaged almost every night. She said she liked texting better than calling. It gave her space to organize her thoughts. Made sense, I guess, and she wasn't like weird or robotic. She was funny and thoughtful and asked stuff about my childhood that no one else ever really did. Like she cared. She'd send me these huge blocks of text about relationships, why she found it hard to trust people, and how she was trying to rebuild her tolerance for closeness. I thought it was super deep. I told my roommate she was like one of those rare people you meet who just gets it. After maybe 3 weeks of texting daily, we started video calling. At first just short ones like 10 minutes, but they slowly turned into these hours-long sessions where we'd both be lying in bed, half asleep, talking about life and death, and whatever was on our minds. She told me she didn't really have close friends, said she pushed people away. I remember saying I didn't mind, that I wanted to be there, thought I was doing something meaningful. We talked for a little over 2 months. I told her about my dad, my weird relationship with food, even my compulsive habit of checking if I locked the door 3 times before bed. Stuff I never even told my ex. She just kind of nodded and asked me to explain more. I thought she was genuinely listening, like she had this quiet patience about her. Then one night, she asked me something that felt a little off. She said, "Can you tell me how you'd respond if I suddenly pulled away emotionally?" It wasn't random. She framed it like it was related to a dream she had. But I remember thinking it was kind of weird how clinical it sounded. I brushed it off. Said I'd probably be confused, maybe sad, maybe it was something I did. She said thanks and then switched topics. just like that. Over the next few weeks, her tone shifted. She started saying things like, "This is overwhelming," or "I feel like I'm drowning," whenever I told her how much I appreciated her. Then she'd vanish for 2 or 3 days. No messages, no calls. She'd come back with long explanations about anxiety or how her therapist told her to create boundaries. I wanted to be supportive. I figured she was trying to figure herself out, and I didn't want to make her feel guilty. But this kept happening. These weird patterns, like she'd let herself get close, then immediately back away like I was burning her. Then she'd come back again, and I'd get hopeful. Rinse, repeat. At one point, she literally coasted me for 10 days. I was honestly sick about it. I didn't know if I should be mad or worried. When she finally texted me again, she said, "I just needed to reset. This is all part of something I'm working through." I asked her what that meant, and she kind of dodged it. Said she couldn't fully explain yet, but she appreciated my role in it. "You're helping more than you know." That was her exact phrase. It hit weird, but I wanted to believe it was a compliment. Anyway, everything unraveled when my cousin, who's doing psych undergrad at a state school, was visiting, and I casually brought Olivia up. Told her how she was studying to be a therapist too. My cousin asked what program, and when I told her, she raised an eyebrow. Said that school didn't offer a clinical track at all. I was like, "What do you mean?" And she straight up pulled up their website. Nothing. They had psychology courses, sure, but nothing licensed. No practicum, no placements, no therapy work. I confronted Olivia about it the next day, gently. I said something like, "Hey, I'm a little confused about your program," and instead of clarifying, she sent this wall of text about how she needed to be honest. What followed was bizarre. She admitted she wasn't in a real program. Said she used to study psych years ago, but dropped out. And then she said she'd been doing something called exposure mapping, where she intentionally put herself in situations that trigger her fear of closeness to desensitize herself. And apparently I was part of that. She said our entire connection was helping her rebuild her emotional responses in real time, and that I've been a kind of mirror to help her identify patterns. She framed it like I should feel good about it, like I was part of some recovery timeline. I didn't know what to say. It didn't even register at first. I think I just stared at the screen for a full minute. I didn't reply, not right away. I went outside and just walked. Ended up at the corner store, bought a bag of trail mix and a grape soda I didn't even want, and sat on the curb. I kept going over the conversations we had, every late night call, every time I told her something vulnerable. And she was, what? Taking notes? She messaged me a few days later. Asked if I wanted to debrief, like it was a school project or something. I blocked her. The weirdest part, I still don't think she did it to hurt me. I think she genuinely believed she was working through something and just used me as the tool. I haven't talked about it much since. People wouldn't get it. It sounds too weird to be real. But sometimes when I'm talking to someone new and they ask if I've been in anything serious lately, I just laugh and say, it's a long story. Because it is too long, too weird, too messed up. And no, I don't text back anymore if someone says they're studying psych. They're psycho. This started on Hinge, which is funny because I only re-downloaded the app out of boredom. It was one of those Sundays where everything felt stale. My food, my apartment, my playlists. I remember thinking, whatever, I'll just swipe through a few people and probably delete it again in 2 days. Then I'd matched with this guy named Elliot. No pictures, just one of those profile photos that looked more like an aesthetic shot than an actual person. And facing away from the camera near a window, golden hour lighting. His prompts were clever but vague. One said, voice notes over selfies any day. And the other was something dumb like, if I could have dinner with anyone, it'd be someone who laughs with their whole face. Stuff that felt deep in a safer Hinge kind of way. We started chatting. Right off the bat, he said he wasn't a huge fan of texting, so he sent a voice note. His voice was calm, kind of raspy, but in a podcast host way. I'd listened to it maybe 3 times before I replied. It was oddly comforting, like the audio version of someone leaning in just enough to feel intimate without overstepping. I got into it. So we started communicating mostly through voice notes. That was the whole vibe. He said he found texting too performative and preferred real-time stuff. At first I thought it was a little much, but then I got used to it. It felt more human, like we were having real conversations instead of playing a game of digital ping pong. After about a week, I asked for a photo, not in a weird way, just something casual like, hey, I like having a face to go with a voice. He dodged it, said he didn't love taking pictures and was trying to stay offline more. He had excuses ready, said he'd been burned before by people reverse searching his images or using them without consent. I didn't question it too hard. We'd built this whole rhythm, and honestly, his voice felt so familiar by then that I didn't think about it much. But here's where it started to get weird. He kept asking me hyper-specific questions about my high school years, not in a nostalgic way, more like, did people ever call you a nickname back then? Or what did you look like in freshman year? He made it sound like he just liked hearing stories about people's awkward phases. I figured he was just one of those sentimental types. I told him about this cringy poetry club I was in, how I had braces until junior year, how I used to get picked on for my voice cracking during presentations. I even mentioned this one guy who bullied me a lot back then, said his name without thinking. And Elliot got real quiet. He didn't respond for almost a full day. Then he came back like nothing happened. Kept the conversation flowing. But after that, little things started slipping into the voice notes. Phrases that sounded oddly familiar. Inside jokes that I hadn't told him yet. Stuff that wasn't public. Stuff that only someone who went to school with me could know. I didn't put it together right away. It wasn't until one night when I played one of his voice notes on speaker and my roommate walked in. She paused and said, "Wait, that voice sounds weirdly familiar. Isn't that Jake from high school?" And suddenly my stomach just dropped. Jake, as in the guy who used to kick the back of my chair during math class. The guy who once made a fake Instagram account pretending to be me and followed half the school with it. That Jake. At first I thought, no way. I hadn't heard his voice in years. But the more I listened, the more I started to notice it too. The slight drawl on certain words. The way he laughed right after his own jokes, like he was preloading the punchline. It was him. I went full detective, looked up old recordings from school projects, stalked every possible social account that could have been linked to him. He'd mostly gone off the grid, but I found an old SoundCloud he used to upload freestyle raps to. I compared the voices. It was a match. I didn't even feel mad at first, just embarrassed. Like I'd been living in this cozy little world with someone who was basically a ghost from the worst part of my past. I didn't message him back right away, just sat on it, wondered what his angle was. Then a week later, I got a DM from a burner account on Instagram. It was a screen recording our voice note convo, edited with captions like it was some kind of twisted podcast. The caption read, "People really be out here falling for voices." I could have told him I was Shrek. My chest actually hurt, like full body tension. I didn't even realize how much I'd invested into those nightly convos until it all felt like a public joke. I blocked him, obviously. Deleted Hinge again. But the thing that stuck with me was how much he remembered. He wasn't just impersonating a random person. He knew exactly how to hook me. He knew the stuff I wanted to be seen for, the things I never got acknowledged for back then, and he twisted all of that into this fake personality who saw me the way I always wished someone had in high school. I don't know how long he was planning it or why he even did it. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe he just wanted to see if he could get in my head. Or maybe it was some delayed ego trip. But it worked. I didn't tell anyone except my roommate. I was too embarrassed to admit how much I'd let myself believe in Elliot, or whoever he was. I still have voice notes saved in my phone. I don't listen to them, but I also haven't deleted them. It's like part of me still can't believe it happened. That someone could come back from my past, wear a different voice, and make me trust them all over again, just to laugh about it in private. That's the last time I ever trusted someone who refuses to send a picture. She messaged me first, which immediately got my attention. Her profile said she had just moved to the area a couple weeks ago and was just looking to make friends for now. I remember thinking it was refreshing. Everyone else on apps felt like they were pushing for something. Hookups, relationships, validation. But Vanessa was like, chill, no pressure. Said she just wanted to meet new people, hang out, and see where things went. Casual but intentional. Her profile was simple too, just a few selfies, one of her drinking boba, another one sitting cross-legged on a dock at sunset. Nothing overly curated, no filters. We matched on Bumble and we started chatting later that night. The conversation was smooth, easy. She asked questions that felt like real curiosity, not just small talk. Stuff like, what's your favorite hour of the day? And who was the first person that made you feel understood? It was weirdly deep for a Bumble convo, but it didn't feel forced. She said she just moved from the East Coast and was kind of trying to reboot her sense of connection after a rough year. I didn't push for details, but she dropped hints about a breakup, something about the relationship ending badly and her needing to get away. We decided to meet up after about a week of chatting. She suggested a bookstore cafe that I didn't even know existed, tucked into a side street downtown with plants hanging from the ceiling and lo-fi jazz playing nonstop. She got there before me and was already flipping through a copy of The Body Keeps the Score. I made a dumb joke about it being the unofficial Bible of every overthinker I know as she laughed. Like a real laugh and not the polite kind. I liked her instantly. She said she wasn't ready to date again, but she liked meeting people organically and seeing where energy went. I was cool with that. Honestly, it made the whole thing less tense. We started hanging out regularly. Coffee shops, bookstores, walks through neighborhoods we hadn't been to. She'd always ask these really introspective questions. Sometimes I felt like I was in a therapy session, but I didn't mind. She'd get attention in a way that people usually don't. She remembered tiny details I said in passing, like the exact brand of cereal I hate and that I used to cry during that dumb Pixar short about the dumpling. After a few weeks, I started catching feelings. Obviously. I mean, she was smart and curious, and somehow always knew what to ask next. But she kept the boundary clear. I'm just trying to understand how people connect, she said once, after I asked her how she was feeling about us. I figured she was being cautious after whatever breakup she'd been through. Around the fifth or sixth time we met up, we had this long conversation about dating and vulnerability. She asked me what I usually do when I like someone. I told her about the last few people I dated and how I always feel like I end up overcompensating, being too available, too eager, like I'm trying to prove I'm not like other guys. She nodded, super focused, then asked what the most emotionally vulnerable thing I'd done for someone was. I told her about writing a letter I never sent to an ex, and she asked if I still had it. I admitted I did in a folder on my laptop called Unsent Stuff, and she looked genuinely fascinated. Then she asked if I ever feel like I'm too self-aware to be in love anymore. That question stayed with me for days. The turning point came when she randomly canceled one of our hangouts, saying she had to meet a deadline. I asked what she was working on. She said just some writing, nothing serious. But then I noticed she had a Medium link in her Instagram bio I hadn't seen before. I clicked it, and that's when everything started unraveling. The article at the top was titled Dating Men as a Social Experiment. The passive predatory nature of the emotionally eager. I remember just staring at the screen like my brain had short-circuited. The post was anonymous, but her writing style was unmistakable. And the things she described, specific details, places we went, questions she asked, they were pulled word for word from our convos. She even described this unsent letter I told her about. She changed names and little things, but it was obviously me. She called it field work. She described how she'd moved to a new city intentionally detached, wanting to explore how men present themselves when there's no guarantee of sex or romance. She wrote that the emotionally available man is the new predator, not in a violent way, but in how he uses vulnerability as currency to get affection. She said she'd been recording her interactions as emotional data. There were quotes, literal quotes from our conversations. Stuff I thought was just between us, now floating out in the open for anyone to dissect. She broke down my emotional patterns like I was a lab subject. Called my attempts at honesty a performance of safe masculinity designed to earn trust. I actually felt sick reading it, like cold sweat, heart racing kind of sick. I didn't message her. I didn't even know what I'd say. I waited a few days and checked back, and the article had already gained traction. Comments like brilliant analysis and wow, this is exactly why I don't trust men anymore. One person even wrote, I hope she turns this into a book. And maybe she will. The worst part? There were other posts, more entries, different men, different stories. She'd been doing this for months. Probably since before she even moved here, if she ever even actually moved here at all. For all I know, she was local the whole time and just created that narrative to make people open up more. I never confronted her. What would that even look like? Hey, I saw your expose where you called me an emotionally manipulative archetype and dissected my soul like it was a term paper. Cool stuff. Nah, I just blocked her and ghosted the whole situation. And now, anytime someone says they're just looking for friends, I kind of want to throw my phone across the room. So Dylan was one of those people you match with and immediately think, okay, finally, someone normal. His profile had like 3 pictures total. One was him in a hoodie next to a dog, another at a food truck with some friends blurred out, and the third was a meme about not knowing how to fold a fitted sheet. Basic in a way that felt intentional. His bio just said, exhausted tech guy, good with tabs, bad with feelings. That made me laugh. He messaged first, made a joke about how I used a photo at a farmer's market, but admitted I didn't even like kale. It wasn't original, but it was timed right, and I replied. We hit it off in a low stakes, slightly sarcastic way. Dylan said he worked at a mid-sized startup doing back-end system stuff. Boring. He admitted, but remote and paid well. He lived just outside the city in one of those newish buildings that looked like they were designed by a former DJ who found minimalism. He called himself a recovering Redditor. Said he used to be way too online and now tried to spend more time in the real. That should have been a clue. Our first date was at this room and place that didn't take reservations, so we waited outside for 25 minutes and ended up talking about weird YouTube rabbit holes while we stood in line. He was charming in a not trying too hard way. Like the kind of guy who listens more than he talks but always slips in a clever one-liner right before it gets quiet. He didn't look like someone who cared about social media at all. Didn't even post on Instagram. That somehow made him more appealing. We went on 3 dates in total. Always low-key. Always his idea. A walk in the park with iced coffee, a burrito spot that only had bar seating, a visit to a used electronics shop that turned into us talking about old tech we used to use as kids. I liked him. He wasn't showy or clingy, just present. But there were tiny things I noticed that didn't quite add up, like he glanced behind me a lot, even when we were mid-conversation, or how he always carried this backpack but never opened it. And on our third date, when we sat at this bench overlooking a busy intersection, he kept positioning himself at weird angles. I thought maybe he had social anxiety or just liked having a clear view of his surroundings. Then, out of nowhere, he canceled our fourth hangout. Said something vague about getting pulled into a dev sprint. I texted a few days later to check in, and he left me on read. I didn't think much of it. We weren't exclusive or anything. Just another maybe thing that fizzled out. It happens. About a week after that, my friend Nat sent me a screenshot. It was from YouTube. The channel name was the Red Ledger, which already gave off bad vibes. But the thumbnail was what got me. It was a still frame from our second date, the walk in the park. The angle was from behind a bench, clearly filmed from a distance. I zoomed in, and yep, that was me. That was my jacket. That was my hand holding an iced shea I remembered because the lid cracked and spilled down my sleeve. The title of the video was Modern Dating: How Emotionally Trained Men Lose Their Edge, live example. I don't even know how Nat found it. Probably one of those random algorithm flukes. The video had under 2,000 views, but it was there. Public. With my voice in it. The audio wasn't crystal clear, but you could hear enough. Me talking about why I would use dating apps that often. Me explaining how I'd rather be alone than settle. Me laughing at one of his jokes and then pausing before opening up about a breakup from last year. The video cut in and out of subtitles with captions like, "Watch how she tests his vulnerability tolerance," and "He's about to expose emotional weaknesses. Note the shift in her body language." It was insane, like watching myself in a psychological breakdown I didn't consent to. He had a whole series, short videos, each one dissecting interactions with women from a sociological perspective, as he wrote in the About section. But really, it was just him pretending to be this emotionally intelligent guy while secretly recording conversations and narrating over them afterward with this cold, analytical tone. One was at the electronics store. One was in his car. One was literally just audio from what I'm guessing was a phone in his hoodie pocket. The worst part, in the comments, people were discussing me. Not by name, but in the creepiest possible way. Saying stuff like she's textbook validation seeker, or you can tell she's used to getting away with low-effort vulnerability. Someone else said he should have pushed her more in the first convo to see if she'd snap, like it was some sick game. I felt gross. Violated. Embarrassed that I hadn't noticed any of it. Then I thought I was connecting with someone I was actually being studied and picked apart like some weird socio-political case study. And that backpack, probably full of gear. Mike packs. Hidden GoPro, whenever he needed to play real-world pickup artist while pretending to be emotionally evolved. I didn't report the video. I didn't want more attention. I just wanted it gone. I emailed the channel through a burner and said I knew it was me and if it wasn't taken down, I'd report it to the platform. The next day, the whole channel went private. A few weeks later, it was gone. I haven't seen him since. No closure. No apology. Nothing. But sometimes I swear I see him in crowds. Just glimpses of guys in hoodies with earbuds, hovering near dates like they're waiting to hear the magic words they can clip and upload. I triple check now. I look for red lights, reflections, weird blinking bags. I hate that I do, but I also know better now. Never trust a guy who says he's trying to be less online. This started on a dumb app I downloaded during a weird bout of insomnia. Some artsy-looking dating platform that only let you send one message per day. I can't even remember what it was called now. Something like Sonder or Glint, or one of those names that sounds like it came from a Pinterest board. It was trying to market itself as intention-based, which basically meant, if you message someone, it better not be just hey. I got matched with Isabella on day 2. Her profile wasn't super detailed, but it had a vibe. Her bio said, recovering from burnout. Lover of noodles, piano music, and slow mornings. Her photos looked soft and warm, sunlight through curtains. Polaroid-style selfies, black ink sketches of people's hands. It was the kind of profile that felt curated without trying too hard. She felt grounded. She didn't seem to be trying to impress anyone. She messaged me first, tell me about the last small thing that made you really happy. I said something dumb about a good orange and a guy who waved at me from his bike like we were old friends. She replied with a voice note, which I didn't even know the app allowed. Her voice was chill, kind of low, kind of raspy, and she laughed while talking like she wasn't trying to sound perfect. I listened to it twice. That's how it started. We didn't move fast. No flirting right away. It was long, rambling conversations about music, food, weird dreams, and how exhausting it was to care about everything all the time. She said she was a graphic designer who freelanced from home and had been cutting back on screen time. That's why she didn't have a lot of social media. She had one locked Instagram account with 4 followers and a blank profile pic, and she said she'd just use it to keep in touch with her brother. It didn't feel like catfish behavior at the time. It felt like boundaries, like she burned out from the algorithm and was trying to be offline in a world that never stops buzzing. I got it. I respected it. We talked every day for about 2 months. Not constantly, just in bursts. She'd send me playlists, voice notes, the occasional photo of her desk or what she was cooking. Always from a specific angle, like off to the side or from behind. Never full-face selfies. But she joked about being camera shy, and it felt human. Real people are awkward about photos too. She made me feel like I was slowly being let into something. She asked really thoughtful questions. Told me she liked how I didn't rush to fill silence. Said she felt safe talking to me, which, yeah, that hits. Especially when you're used to shallow convos that dry up after the third, what do you do? She sent me a drawing once that she said reminded her of something I'd said about feeling like my thoughts were always 2 seconds ahead of my mouth. It was abstract, but it hit hard. I saved it to my phone. So, yeah, it built up. I started catching feelings. I never asked to meet in person because I didn't want to push her, and also because she said she was going through some heavy personal stuff and didn't feel like her best self. I didn't want to be another guy who demanded access before she was ready. The unraveling happened in the most random way. I was on my friend's laptop, using it to show him a recipe I remembered Isabella sent me. I typed in a keyword to search my messages and ended up opening the voice note she'd sent about it. My friend turned to me and said, "Wait, pause that, play that again." I did. He listened and said, "Why does that sound like Ethan?" I laughed at first, but then he made me play it again, slowed it down, then again, and suddenly I couldn't unhear it. It was Ethan, or maybe Ethan with a weird filter. Ethan, as in my friend's coworker. Ethan, who was married. Ethan, who was super into experimental audio gear and had once joked at a party about how easy it would be to fake an identity online if you really committed. My friend started putting it together way faster than I could. Apparently, Ethan and his wife had a weird thing for online performance art. They'd done projects before, anonymous blogs, collaborative short stories where they'd pretend to be strangers falling in love. It was like a creative outlet for them, role-playing the digital age. But this wasn't a story. This was my actual life. I didn't believe it until I found a photo from one of the old projects my friend remembered. There was a sketch in the background, one of the exact same ones Isabella had sent me. The same ink style, same theme, same paper. The pieces fell into place after that. I started noticing things. How sometimes Isabella's voice sounded slightly different between messages. How she never said anything live, only pre-recorded notes. How the writing style would shift just a little between texts. Turns out they were taking turns, literally swapping off like tag team role players. One would write, the other would record. Sometimes they collaborated. Sometimes they surprised each other. I was a character in their little improv exercise. I didn't confront them. What do you even say to that? Hey, I figured out you're two people pretending to be one person so you can live out your creative therapy sessions through unsuspecting strangers. I just deleted the app, blocked the number, and walked around my apartment for an hour feeling like someone had puppeteered my feelings just because they were bored. It wasn't about being fooled. It was that they knew what they were doing. They picked someone who wouldn't push too hard, who would take things slow, who wouldn't demand selfies or pressure for a meetup. They built a fake safe space and waited to see what I'd give them. And I gave them a lot. I still have the playlist they made. Sometimes a song will pop up on shuffle and I'll sit there staring at the wall, thinking about how I let someone into my head who didn't even exist. And the drawing? It's still saved. I can't bring myself to delete it, even though I know it's just part of the act. I met Ryan through a sober dating app that honestly felt more like a group chat than a place to meet people. Everyone was kind of oversharing, dropping quotes from recovery books, talking about triggers and relapses like it was Sunday brunch. It was weirdly comforting. I wasn't even sure I was ready to date, but I figured it'd be less exhausting than swiping through the usual mess. Ryan's profile caught my attention because it was so low-key. No emotional essays or endless stats about his sober date or how many 12-step meetings he hit a week. It just said, figuring it out. Music dogs, long walks with nowhere to be. He had one photo, him in a jean jacket holding what looked like an oat milk latte on a park bench. His face was half in shadow. I liked the mystery. I liked that he didn't feel the need to perform. He messaged me first, asked if I heard the new Big Thief album. I had, and that was enough to kick off a conversation that kept going for 4 straight days. He said he was 18 months sober and had moved to the city recently to start over. Said his last relationship ended because he needed space to focus on his recovery. That hit me hard in a way that felt familiar. He wasn't preachy about it either. He made fun of people who turned sobriety into a personality. I liked that. He had this dry, chill vibe, like someone who'd been through some stuff and didn't need to make it a whole thing anymore. Our first date was at this tiny cafe that only served non-alcoholic drinks, mocktails, herbal sodas, that kind of thing. He ordered something with ginger and lime and made fun of it for being basically a spicy LaCroix. He had a good laugh. Warm low. He asked a lot of questions, but never in a nosy way, just observant. I remember telling him about my weird morning routine, and he said, that actually makes sense, like it wasn't strange at all. It made me feel normal. I hadn't felt normal in a while. We started hanging out more. Dinners, walks, music nights. He always wanted to meet up during the day or early evening. Said he didn't like being out at night, too many old temptations. I respected that. I thought it was healthy. He told me he was trying to rewire his brain away from nighttime being associated with drinking. That sounded real. After about a month, I introduced him to a few of my friends, people who knew me from meetings from back in the messier days. They liked him immediately. He fit right in, knew how to navigate the conversations, didn't try to one-up anyone with trauma stories, wasn't performative with the I'm doing the work stuff. Just chill, present, honest, or so I thought. Then one night, I was at this little backyard party my friend Nat was throwing. I was helping set up early, stringing lights through a janky wooden fence when she pulled me aside and said, "So I saw your guy the other night." I asked what she meant. She said he was at this bar downtown, not just there, drinking. alone, and not like nervously sipping a soda, like drinking. At first, I thought maybe she was wrong, or maybe it was an old photo or something, but no, she was sure. She said she watched him knock back 2 whiskeys in under 30 minutes. Said she almost went up to him, but he didn't see her and she didn't want to blow up his spot if I already knew. I just stood there blinking like my brain forgot how to process new information. I messaged him that night and asked how his week was. Casual. He said it had been tough, work stuff, but he was trying to stay grounded. Said he was journaling more. I asked if he wanted to talk about it. He said he'd rather not spiral and was gonna take a bath and listen to an audiobook. Smooth deflection, I didn't press, but I started noticing things. How he always kept his place too dimly lit. How he never actually poured drinks in front of me. Always came out of the kitchen with a glass. How he always smelled faintly of peppermint gum and hand sanitizer. I brought it up the next time we hung out. I didn't accuse him. Just said I heard from someone he'd been seen at a bar and I was confused. He looked at me for a second and then laughed. Like actually laughed. Not nervously like he thought it was ridiculous. Then he said, "Okay, look, yeah. I drink sometimes, but not the way I used to. I just didn't want to deal with the whole lecture." I remember sitting there thinking, what? He went on to say he still used the sober apps because the women on them were more emotionally in tune and less flaky. He said people on the regular apps were just looking for a distraction, but girls on sober apps really show up. And I just sat there absorbing that. Realizing that everything he told me about his recovery wasn't about him trying to stay sober. It was about him getting access to people who were more likely to give him grace. He said, "I like that you listen. That's rare." Like that was supposed to be a compliment. Like I should feel flattered he picked me. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just told him that what he was doing was beyond manipulative and that he knew exactly what kind of people came to those spaces. People trying to stay afloat. People who've had everything fall apart and are trying to rebuild one conversation at a time. He shrugged and said something like, "You're taking it too seriously." That was the last time I saw him. I didn't even say goodbye, just left. I deleted the app the next morning. Not because I thought everyone on there was fake, but because it felt tainted now. Like someone had stepped into a sacred space and tracked mud all over it. I told a few people. One of them said it wasn't even the first time he'd heard of someone doing that. Using recovery spaces to find people who are more patient, more open. It made me sick. Still does. Ryan might have been sober once. He might even believe the stuff he said, but that version of him I got wasn't trying to heal. He was just using the language of healing to get what he wanted. We met on Instagram, which I know is already cursed territory, but I was in that mood where you just start reacting to stories and somehow end up in a full conversation. She had posted something about grief and music, one of those sad girl playlists with black and white album art and songs that sound like winter. I replied with a comment about one of the tracks, and she messaged me back almost immediately. Said she appreciated people who get it without asking for the whole backstory. I didn't ask for the whole backstory. She offered it anyway. She said she'd just lost someone. Didn't say who at first, just that it had shaken her in a way she wasn't prepared for. She was in that space between trying to heal and not wanting to be around people who didn't understand what it meant to carry grief on a daily basis. Her words, not mine. I thought she sounded intense but genuine. Her posts were a mix of sad poems and selfies with captions like, "Healing slowly and grief makes ghosts of all of us." She was the kind of person who'd post a photo of her coffee with a quote from Virginia Woolf. I should have known. We messaged for a couple weeks before we met up. The conversations were long, poetic, a little dramatic, but kind of addictive. She was all about connection without pressure. Said she didn't want to jump into anything because she was still processing, but liked talking to people who weren't afraid to sit in silence. That line got me. I've been in enough shallow combos lately to crave something with actual weight. Our first hangout was at this quiet park. We walked for like 2 hours, no agenda, just talking. She cried once while describing a dream she had about someone she lost. I asked if she wanted to talk about it, and she said she wasn't ready. I backed off. I figured she'd open up when she was comfortable. Over the next few weeks, we talked constantly. She always messaged first, sent voice notes at midnight, late night playlists, screenshots of poems. She'd say things like, "You feel safe to me," or "You're one of the few people who isn't afraid of emotional honesty." That stuff hits when you're emotionally wired like I am. I thought we were building something real, something slow but meaningful. She never wanted to define what we were, though. Said she wasn't ready for anything structured, but wanted to keep it close. I respected it. I thought, okay, this is what modern love looks like now. Uncertain, fluid, mostly texting. She'd get really deep in the convos. Ask stuff like, what do you think happens to love when people die? And have you ever felt haunted by someone who's still alive? I was all in. I sent her stuff I usually only tell people I've known for years. She always said she appreciated the vulnerability. She never called, never FaceTimed, never really wanted to meet up in daylight. Said she was emotionally drained or didn't want to perform normal for people yet. I figured grief made everything weird. I didn't push. Then one day, I noticed something weird on her Instagram. In a story she posted, she was wearing a hoodie I recognized. Not because I'd seen her wear it, but because I'd seen someone else wear it. It has specific design, kind of niche, and I realized it was the same one I'd seen in an old account I used to follow years ago. A guy named Marcus, who was a photographer and used to post aesthetic shots of his girlfriend. That girlfriend was Lily. I hadn't followed either of them in forever, but I went digging. His page was private now, but her old comments were still there on his older posts. She wasn't grieving someone who died, she was grieving a breakup. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I felt off. Like the whole tone of her messages had changed. More dramatic, more emotionally charged, like she was constantly teeing me up to say things that sounded like I adored her, just for the reaction. I went back through our messages, and I noticed a pattern. Every time I complimented her or said something emotionally supportive, she screenshotted it. I didn't think much of it before, but now it stood out. The final puzzle piece came from mutuals. Not close friends, just people who vaguely knew both of us. One of them messaged me and said, "Hey, random, but I think Lily might be using you to get to someone." She sent me a screenshot. It was a story Marcus had posted, maybe accidentally before deleting it. One of those question box things. Someone had asked, "You and Lily ever gonna talk again?" And his answer said, "Not after she keeps sending me convos with other guys like it's a contest." I read it maybe 5 times. I asked Lily about it directly. Didn't accuse her. Just said, "Hey, I saw something, I'm feeling confused." She went quiet, then hit me with this whole monologue about how grief makes people do strange things, how she was trying to understand how connection works when your heart's already occupied. No apology, just vibes. She didn't deny it. She didn't even seem that surprised I figured it out. I asked her if any of it had been real. She said, "I like the way you saw me." That was it. I didn't block her. I didn't even unfollow her. I just stopped replying. She still posts sometimes. Always the same mood. Poetic sadness, long captions, photos and mirrors. Sometimes I wonder if she's still doing it. Still collecting tenderness like it's proof she's wanted. Still forwarding love to someone who left. It's weird to think about. That was part of someone else's narrative, and I never even got to be the main character. I was just evidence. Zayd had that modern rustic vibe. His profile had a picture of a log cabin window with a blurry sunset behind it, a stack of paperback books with no covers, and one photo of him sitting in front of a campfire with a beanie pulled low and his face mostly in shadow. I remember thinking it was kind of aesthetic in a woodsy, minimalist way, like he'd escaped the grind and was living slow on purpose. His bio said something about relearning how to be quiet in a noisy world, and remote work from a real cabin, not an Airbnb. I was immediately intrigued. He stood out from the sea of tech bros and gym selfies. He messaged me first, said he liked my playlist and asked if I believed that loneliness and solitude were different things. Its whole vibe was thoughtful, quiet, even kind of romantic in that I only own 2 sweaters and a ceramic mug type of way. He said he lived alone in a cabin about 2 hours away, doing software design stuff, only coming into town for supplies or to sit at the library. I joked that it sounded like a self-imposed exile, and he said he called it emotional recalibration. We started texting daily. He didn't have great reception, so he said he usually parked outside of the local library to get Wi-Fi and do his work. I thought that was cool. Lo-fi, almost poetic. He sent me voice notes from his truck with rain tapping on the windshield and birds chirping in the background. It felt peaceful, like talking to someone who'd fully stepped out of the mess and into something real. He said he liked the pace we were going, that it was refreshing to talk without the constant pressure of meeting right away or being on all the time. I agreed. I had a stream of dates that all felt rushed and performative. With Zayd, I could just be. We talked about everything. He asked about my worst fears, my childhood dreams, the last time I cried in public. He opened up too, said he left the city because his old life felt fake. Too much surface level stuff, too much overstimulation. He made it sound like he was rebuilding his life from scratch, one good conversation at a time. He said I made him feel grounded again. That one got me. A few weeks in, I asked if he wanted to do a video call. He said he didn't like being on camera. Not in a catfish way, just that it made him feel weird, disconnected from the moment. I bought it. He always responded to messages quickly, remembered little details, and shared playlists and photos of the woods near his cabin. One was a misty tree line. Another was a hand holding a pine cone with a chipped mug in the background. I didn't think to reverse image search them. Who does that when you're vibing with someone who's thoughtful and weird in the same way you are? We planned to meet a few times. Each time, something came up. He said his truck needed new tires, or the library had a power outage, or he wasn't feeling great mentally and didn't want to bring that energy into real life yet. I told myself it was fine. I liked the slowness. I liked that we were building something before ever laying eyes on each other in real time. But it started to get strange. He'd disappear for a whole day and come back with overly poetic explanations, like I needed to sit with the weight of my own noise. One time, he said he got caught in a snowdrift and had to wait overnight for it to thaw. I looked up the weather. It hadn't even snowed in that part of the state. That was when the first real red flag went up. I asked for a photo of him with a timestamp. Not in an aggressive way. Just framed it like, send me something from today so I can imagine what your setup looks like. He sent a blurry pic of his laptop with a campfire screensaver and a mug of something next to it. No face. No location. No date. I showed it to my friend, who laughed and said that could be literally anywhere. So I got curious. I reverse searched some of the photos he'd sent. Most didn't turn up anything but one, this shot of his supposed desk view, a mossy hill with fog, was taken from a stock image site. Posted 6 years ago, I didn't know what to say. I didn't even confront him at first. I just sat with it, wondering what part of any of it had been real. Eventually, I did ask. I said, hey, can I ask something kind of direct? Where exactly are you right now? He waited like 3 hours to respond, then said he was in between places. That the cabin had been temporary, and he was staying mobile while looking for something more permanent. I pushed a little. He admitted he'd been sleeping in his car for the last few weeks, that he parked in different library lots depending on what Wi-Fi was strongest. Said he'd been testing how long someone would connect with him without needing the performance of real-world presence. I was speechless. He said it started as a curiosity, that people always said they wanted deep connection, that the real stuff mattered more than looks or lifestyle. So he wanted to see if it was true. Said I was the first one to get this far, like I passed some test I didn't even know I was part of. He tried to justify it. Said nothing he told me was fake, just the setting, that everything else had been honest, the feelings, the combos, the connection. But how could I believe that, knowing he crafted a whole identity around a place he didn't even live? He said, I wanted to see if someone could love the core of me without needing the rest. I didn't respond. I just closed my phone and stared at my wall for a long time. I felt gross, like I'd been some contestant in his emotional sociology project, like everything I'd told him was being measured for depth and loyalty. I didn't block him. I didn't even tell him I was done. I just left it. Coasted. Not out of pettiness, but because I had nothing left to say. I didn't want to give him another data point. Sometimes I still wonder if he's sitting in that same car, Wi-Fi bouncing off some library roof, talking to someone else, saying the same things, sending the same foggy tree photo, waiting to see how long they'll believe it too. I matched with Sophie on this dating app called Vibe. It's one of those personality quiz apps where they make you answer 80 questions about emotional intelligence, taste in food, whether or not you forgive people easily, and then match you based on core alignment. It felt like overkill at the time, but I was bored and figured I'd give it 2 weeks before deleting it like everything else. She popped up immediately. Profile photo looked like a still from a French film. Soft lighting, curly hair in a messy bun, freckles, oversized sweater, barely their makeup. Her prompts were actually interesting too. One said, "I'd rather be understood than admired." Another was, "If I'm quiet, it's because I'm listening to what your silence is saying." It was all so curated that I should have been suspicious, but it felt like she just got it. Like she was fluent in the emotional language no one else even tried to learn. She messaged me first, said my answer about being obsessed with traffic lights as a kid made her laugh. I didn't even remember writing that, but she said it reminded her of how she used to pretend to be a crosswalk button when she was 6. Dumb stuff like that. Very specific, random, almost too relatable. She was witty, smart, curious. We started texting, and within 2 days, it felt like we had this locked-in emotional rhythm. The conversations were weirdly perfect. She always replied fast, asked deep questions, remembered things I told her even in passing. I'd say something like, "My coworker's being a pain this week," and 2 days later she'd say, "Did the coworker chill out, or are you still planning their downfall?" It was charming, intuitive, almost like texting a version of yourself that just happened to be more confident and slightly more poetic. Her photos were minimal, just 3. All in soft lighting, always half-angled or partially obscured by some artsy shadow or hair. She said she didn't like taking selfies and didn't want to feed into the visual first dating culture. That made sense to me. I liked that she kept it low-key. The weird part was, she didn't want to FaceTime. She said she had video anxiety and had been burned before by people who made her feel scrutinized. I told her I didn't care about video, that I liked texting, and she said that meant more than I knew. She had a way of saying stuff like that, making every little act of patience feel meaningful. This went on for about 3 weeks. I started catching feelings hard. She had a calm energy in her messages, never forced the convo, just responded like she was always fully present. It was weirdly grounding. I remember telling my friend, "I feel like I'm talking to someone who's already seen the version of me that hasn't happened yet." It felt like that. Eventually, I asked to meet, not in a pushy way, just said I'd love to finally hang out if she was comfortable. She said yes, but only if we kept it chill. No big dinner, no photos, no crowds. I said sure. We planned to meet at this low-key tea shop in a quiet neighborhood she picked. That was the only time she seemed even slightly hesitant. She asked if I could text when I got there and wait for her outside. I got there early, sat on the bench out front and waited. A girl came walking up, dressed exactly like Sophie said she'd be. Oversized hoodie, sneakers, curls. She smiled, waved, and said my name. I was a little thrown. She looked similar to the photos, but something felt slightly off. I couldn't put my finger on it, like the bone structure was just a little different. Not in a she looks different in person way. More like she was cosplaying someone specific. But she acted like Sophie. Same speech patterns, same weird little phrases she'd used in texts. We walked inside, sat down, and ordered drinks. The conversation flowed just like it had online. She laughed at the exact same jokes, remembered everything I told her. It was eerie how perfectly matched she felt to the digital version of herself. Then something weird happened. Her phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of the screen when she flipped it face down. It said Sophie, which made no sense, unless she was texting herself. She caught me looking and immediately changed the subject. That was when it clicked. Her voice was similar to the voice notes I'd gotten, but not quite the same. Her eye color was different than I remembered in the photos, but I chalked it up to lighting before. Her laugh was familiar, but didn't feel lived in. After the date, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I reverse searched her profile pictures. None of them turned up. Not a single match. That's not rare if someone's private, but something about the images felt off. Too perfect, like stock photography pretending to be candid. I ran them through an AI image detector tool out of curiosity. They were generated, AI faces, not real, not based on real people. Just constructed features meant to simulate a natural look. I freaked out. I texted her, well, whoever I'd been talking to, and said I was confused about the photos. She didn't reply for almost a full day. Then I got a message saying, "I think you're smart enough to figure out what's going on. Please don't be mad." After some back and forth, they finally admitted it. Sophie wasn't real. She was a digital persona. The girl I met at the tea shop was a friend. Someone who'd been paid to meet me once to maintain the illusion in person. Apparently, the whole thing started as a writing project. The person behind Sophie was experimenting with emotional realism and wanted to see how believable a fully fictional but emotionally responsive AI personality could be if layered with real-time texting, consistent voice notes, and eventually a body double. They called it an experiment in intimacy simulation. I didn't even know how to respond. It wasn't a scam. It didn't ask for money. It didn't catfish in the usual way, but felt violating in a whole different sense. Like I'd given real emotions to a ghost built in Photoshop and OpenAI Playground. I gave pieces of myself to a well-scripted hallucination. I blocked the number, deleted everything. I still don't know the name of the real person behind it. Just that someone out there built a fake person smart enough to learn me, then hired someone else to play her just long enough to make it feel real. Sometimes I wonder how many others there were, how many conversations she had going at once, how many other people still think she's real. I matched with Noah, a low-effort dating app I downloaded on a Sunday when I was in bed eating cereal and ignoring real life. His profile was short, barely filled out. No long paragraphs, no corny jokes. Just a blurry pic of him with a dog, a sentence that said something like, "I like quiet people," and one answer to a prompt that read, "Socially anxious but weirdly good at making eye contact with animals." It was charming in that kind of quiet, self-aware way. Seemed like someone who wouldn't try to talk over me the whole time. Big plus. He messaged first, and it wasn't small talk. He asked me if I'd ever felt safer alone than with other people. It sounds like a heavy opener, but it didn't feel that way coming from him. There was something easy about how he asked things, like it wasn't a trap, just curiosity. I told him I had, and we got into this whole conversation about overstimulation and how annoying it is when people confuse being introverted with being rude. He said he hated busy places and had kind of made peace with being someone who probably wouldn't ever love parties or crowded anything. I respected that. I've been around enough fake confidence to know when someone's actually just trying to protect their peace. We decided to meet up after about a week of texting. He picked the spot, this tiny tea shop with no music, only a few tables, and lighting that made it feel like someone's living room. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at the far corner table, hoodie on, headphones around his neck. He stood up when I walked over and gave me this tiny, nervous wave. It was weirdly cute. Our first conversation in person was slow, but not awkward. He talked like someone who chose his words carefully, not like he was trying to impress me. He asked about my job, my favorite kind of silence, and told me that he only felt comfortable meeting because he'd scoped out the cafe 2 days before and knew it wouldn't be busy. I liked how intentional he was about things. It felt like he was really trying. He didn't look me in the eye that much, but when he did, it felt like he was really seeing me. I went home that night feeling kind of light and weirdly seen. Like, finally, someone who wasn't trying to overpower the moment. Over the next 2 weeks, we went on 3 more dates, all chosen by him. All super quiet, off the radar spots, an indie bookstore, a park bench overlooking a duck pond. This weird garden cafe I didn't even know existed. He said loud spaces made him shut down. I didn't mind. It was kind of nice being in these little quiet pockets with someone who didn't expect constant talking or big performances. We mostly walked, sipped tea, and had these offbeat convos about memory and music and what childhood foods we still crave. It all felt very soft. I told my best friend that he might actually be the calmest person I'd ever met. But there were little things that didn't fully click. He always had this backpack with him, even if we were just sitting somewhere. Never opened it. Never took anything out of it. It just sat there like a prop. I figured it was comfort. People carry weird things for weird reasons. Then there was this guy at the park on our third date. He sat across from us at another bench and kept looking over. Not constantly, just enough to make me notice. I joked that maybe he thought we were famous or something, and Noel smiled but didn't say much. When I asked him about it later, he changed the subject and started asking me about childhood nicknames. I let it slide. Everything blew up one night when my friend Nat texted me a video with no explanation. It was a screen recording from TikTok, some live stream replay. The caption said, "Day 4 of the incognito dating challenge." Guess how long until she asked to define it. The video was low-res, slightly zoomed out, but it was us. Sitting at the tea shop from our first date. Same outfits, same mugs. My face wasn't clear, but it was me. There's no question. I watched the whole thing in shock. There were little text bubbles popping up over the video, breaking down our body language. Watch her lean in when he stays quiet. Notice how she mirrors his hand placement. The comments were unhinged. People were placing bets on whether I was gonna make a move if I talk about trauma, if I called in my safe space. I felt sick. I didn't even know how he filmed it. I went back in my mind trying to remember anything that seemed off. That stupid backpack. He had it on every date. Always kept it upright, propped against his leg or a table. Never moved it. Never let me near it. That was the camera. I know it now. Probably had some portable battery set up and a phone or tiny camera streaming from inside. Dude was broadcasting our entire date like it was part of some weird reality series. I texted him immediately. Just sent the video. No words. He didn't reply for 2 hours. Then he sent, "I didn't use your name. You weren't identifiable. It's part of a content series on Real Connection." I stared at the message like it was in another language. He went on to say he was trying to capture authentic dating moments for a project about how people connect when they're unaware of being seen. He claimed it was art, that it was harmless because he blurred my face and didn't use audio. He said he was documenting human energy. I asked him how many other people he'd done this with. He said, "Only a few. You stood out though. You were so present." Like that was supposed to mean something to me. Like I was supposed to feel flattered for being manipulated better than the others. I didn't reply, just blocked him. Deleted everything. The account went private a few hours later, then disappeared entirely a few days after that. Maybe someone reported him. Maybe he moved on to the next one. I think about it way more than I want to. How he just sat there across from me, letting me open up while he turned me into content for strangers. I wasn't even a person to him. I was part of a plotline. A data point in his fake little experiment on intimacy. Now when I go on dates, I find myself scanning for cameras, watching their bags, checking for reflections in cafe windows. It's dumb, but it's also not. Because if someone like No could hide behind the perfect anxious guy persona just to mime me for reactions, who's to say the next one isn't doing the same? We met on a hiking trip. Yeah, apparently that's a thing now. More like people looking for trail buddies, local nature hangs kind of vibe. I wasn't even looking for anything romantic when we met. I had just moved to a new area and figured meeting people through shared interests might be less miserable than endless swiping. Her name was Hannah, and she had this photo of herself standing barefoot on a rock ledge above a forest, arms stretched out like she was absorbing sunlight. It was giving crunchy granola goddess energy. Her bio said, "Trying to live a soft life in a hard world." Asked me about mushrooms or human connection. That was enough for me. We started chatting after she commented on a trail photo I posted. She asked if I had any favorite spots to hike that didn't feel spiritually loud. That turned into a conversation about places that feel quiet in a real way, not just because they're silent. She said stuff like that all the time, deep but just left of center enough to feel like she lived in a different layer of the world. I found it fascinating. We hiked together once before anything romantic even came up. She showed up wearing beat-up trail runners and carrying homemade lavender lemon water in a reused kombucha bottle. She had leaves in her hair. I'm not making that up. She was smart in a way that didn't try to prove itself. She'd quote philosophers, but then make a fart joke 5 minutes later. We talked about books, family stuff, why people pretend they're okay when they're not. After the hike, she hugged me and said, "I like your vibe. You're not performative." I didn't know how much that sentence was going to haunt me. We kept hanging out. Sometimes hiking, sometimes making food at her place, which was more of a studio with a mattress on the floor and a ton of candles that smelled like the inside of an art museum. She didn't have a couch. Set furniture made her feel too rooted. Again, I just rolled with it. I thought she was unique, raw. She never posted online, barely even used her phone. She read me poetry at one point, handwritten, in a beat-up notebook with frayed corners. I was in deep. It felt like it was becoming something serious. She asked me questions like, "Do you want kids? And what does commitment look like to you?" But always framed like she was trying to imagine what building a life might look like outside of tradition. I figured that just meant she didn't want a wedding. Cool. Neither do I, but she kept circling around the idea of partnership like she was testing it, poking it to see if it would fall apart on its own. I remember one time I said something dumb, like, I could really see us doing this for a long time, and she got super quiet. Not in a bad way. More like she was turning something over in her head. Then she smiled and said, let's not name it yet. Let's just keep showing up. Seemed romantic at the time. Things got weird around month 3. I noticed she never referred to me as her boyfriend, even though we were exclusive. I asked her about it, and she said labels felt colonial. Which, okay. I didn't totally get that, but I respected it. She didn't like the idea of defining things in concrete terms. She said definitions trap energy. I was like, whatever, I'll be undefined energy trap if it means I get to keep seeing her. But stuff kept stacking. She'd ask philosophical questions that started to feel pointed, like, what if relationships only exist to uphold capitalism? Or do you think love can exist without ownership? I figured she was just being edgy, like intellectually flirty. She always had a way of making deep stuff sound beautiful. Then one night she fell asleep while playing a podcast on her speaker. I couldn't stop listening. It was 2 women talking about relational activism, a phrase I'd never heard before. At first, it sounded like a regular discussion about rejecting traditional norms, but then they started describing something that made my stomach sink. They were talking about using fake relationships as a form of protest. Dating people, forming romantic connections, and then intentionally destabilizing them, not out of malice, but to prove that monogamy and forever culture were socially constructed illusions. One of them said, if you can get someone to want a future with you, and then dismantle a future before it begins, you're showing them the truth. Love is a feedback loop, not a destination. The kicker. One of the hosts said her name at the end. Hannah. Her voice was slightly more animated on the podcast, but it was unmistakably her. I googled the show. It had like 4 episodes total, hosted on this underground podcast platform I'd never heard of. Every episode was about relationship theory, conscious detachment, emotional unpairing, and how romantic delusions were the final form of internalized systemic dependence. It felt like I've been dating a philosopher with a vendetta, like the last few months were just a case study. I had no idea what to do with the information. I waited a few days and then confronted her gently. I didn't say I heard the podcast. I just asked her, do you believe in relationships, like for real? And she looked at me for a second too long before saying, I believe in connections that end when they're supposed to. That was the last straw. I didn't freak out. I didn't ghost. I just told her it felt like I was being pulled into something I didn't fully understand. She said, that's okay. That's how most people feel before they wake up. I left her apartment that night and never went back. 2 months later, her podcast posted another episode. I didn't listen to it, but the description said something about emotional architecture collapsing beautifully. I have no idea if she was talking about me. Probably. I met ads at a community potluck thing. Not a dating app for once, just one of those vaguely spiritual neighborhood events where someone brings gluten-free banana bread. Another person brings a ukulele, and half the people sit on the floor cross-legged talking about space holding. It was hosted at this yoga studio that doubles as a co-working space and sometimes sells incense nobody asked for. I wasn't even going to go, but a friend dragged me. I brought cheap store-bought hummus and a bag of pita chips, fully intending to drop in and bounce after 15 minutes. Then Ads walked up to me near the bookshelf, holding a mug of some earthy tea, wearing a linen button-up and these weird wraparound sandals that made him look like he either lived in a van or just left an ayahuasca ceremony. He smiled like he already knew me. He asked me something out of nowhere like, have you been finding clarity lately? Not how I was, not what I did for work, just that. I laughed and said, not really. And he nodded like he respected the answer. Said his name was Ads, spelled it out like I might get it wrong. I remember thinking he had really good eye contact, intense but not creepy, like he was actually tuned in. He told me he'd recently left a community up north, that it had been structured around collective expansion, but kind of lost its way. I didn't think much of that at the time. I thought he meant a bad housemate situation, or maybe one of those eco-communes that go weird. He said he was reintegrating into the grid and learning how to be soft without being silent. That's how he talked. Always like he was halfway between a TED Talk and a campfire story. We ended up sitting outside on the curb talking for almost 2 hours. He was a good listener. He'd ask questions like, what beliefs have you let go of recently? And what part of yourself do you still defend out of fear? I should have seen the flags, but I just thought he was deep, like emotionally literate in a way most guys aren't. He said he'd been disconnected from mainstream life for about a year and was trying to rebuild trust in natural dynamics. Said I had open energy. I didn't even know what that meant, but it felt like a compliment. We exchanged numbers. Over the next few weeks, we started hanging out more. It wasn't dating at first, just long walks, tea, sometimes meditation. One time he had me lie on the ground in his apartment, which barely had furniture, and listen to a 20-minute audio track of layered frequencies while he burned some dried plant I'd never heard of. I laughed after and said, that was kind of weird, and he smiled and said, your body doesn't lie. You're tuned in more than you think. Again, his all should have set off alarms, but he didn't come off like a weirdo. He never made moves on me, never pressured anything. Just made me feel like I was part of some unfolding story. Eventually, he told me more about the group he'd been in. Said it started as a spiritual community, but over time the founder became less collaborative. He said people weren't allowed to have relationships outside the group. That food was rationed based on alignment. They had to journal their thoughts every morning and submit them weekly for review. He said the final straw was when the leader told him he had stagnant masculine energy. That was the moment he said he packed a bag and left. I felt bad for him. I thought, wow, this guy's been through something really intense, and he's trying to process it in his own way. I told him he was strong for walking away. He said I was the first person who hadn't asked him what the group believed in, only how he felt about it. I thought that meant we were connecting. But over time, his vibe shifted. He started saying stuff like, have you ever wondered why relationships always center scarcity? Or, you ever think monogamy is just a symptom of capitalism? Which, whatever, people have opinions. But he kept pushing the idea that connection was supposed to be non-linear and that love without structure is love without control. I remember sitting there like, okay, this is sounding a little too much like a thesis statement. Then he asked if I wanted to come to a circle. He said it was low-key, just a few people who'd also left communities coming together to repattern their sense of belonging. I said sure, kind of out of curiosity. It was at someone's house on the edge of town. When we got there, the vibe was weird. People were polite, but everything felt rehearsed. No small talk. Everyone referred to each other as sibling. One person introduced themselves by saying, I've been rebirthing for about 6 months now. I smiled and nodded like that was normal. The whole night was people sitting in a circle sharing about false awakening and integrating from the outside in. There was drumming. There was humming. There was one guy who cried while holding a rock. I thought maybe I was just not the right audience. But then during a break, I'd overheard someone talking to ads. They said, have you asked her yet? And he said, not yet. I think she's almost aligned. That made my spine itch. Later, when I asked what they meant, he didn't deny it. He said, I think you're ready to step into the next phase. I said, what next phase? And he said, a space of radical unlearning, a return to the real self. I was like, is this another cult? And he laughed, not in a dismissive way, more like he thought that word didn't apply to what he was doing. I told him I needed some space. He said space was a colonial concept, and that distance is only real if you allow it to be. I said, cool on allowing it to be, and left. He texted me a few times after that. Said things like, you felt like home before you even arrived, and there's still a place for you if you want to walk through the door. I didn't reply. I matched with Yasmin on one of those apps that's supposed to be more personality focused. Like, not just hot people posting mirror selfies, but actual prompts and voice notes and playlists. I was bored and kind of over it with dating at that point, so I wasn't even trying. My bio was short. Something dumb about liking rainy days and eating chips in bed. Yasmin liked one of my answers and replied with a comment about how chips in bed are elite behavior and that anyone who disagrees has never lived. It made me laugh, so I messaged her back. Her profile was simple, 3 photos, all natural light, soft angles. One in a bookstore, one at a beach, one where she's holding a cup of coffee with chipped black nail polish, Her vibe was that kind of effortless, artsy girl you think only exists in European movies and cafes that serve tea in mismatched mugs. She didn't post thirst traps, she didn't try hard, and that made it work. Her messages were funny. Not trying to be funny, but like actually quick. She had jokes about people who say vibes too much and had strong opinions about cereal being better at night than in the morning. It was easy. We got into it fast. She asked questions I actually liked answering, like, what song would play in the background of your most embarrassing moment? I said something about a scene in the grocery store where I knocked over a full row of olives and ran. She said that was the most human thing she'd ever heard and that she liked how my brain worked. We didn't text all day, every day. It was more like when we did talk, it was long and detailed and kind of addictive. She said she didn't like FaceTime and didn't really post online. I figured she was just private, which honestly made sense. She was funny about it too, like she'd say, "You'll just have to trust I'm a 6.5 with great lighting and solid opinions on sandwiches." It didn't feel shady. Just someone who wasn't obsessed with being seen. After about a week, I was like, this is kind of wild. She made me feel interesting. She remembered stuff I said days ago. I'd wake up to these random messages that were like, was just thinking about what you said about feeling homesick in your own house. And it would stop me mid-scroll because no one else texts like that. We talked for over a month. Never met. She always had some reason. Busy with work. Out of town. Visiting family. Not feeling camera ready today. I didn't care that much. Honestly, I liked how chill it was. Like we could just stay in our little bubble and not ruin it by making it a thing too fast. I told myself it was nice to take it slow. That was getting to know someone's mind before their face. That felt different. But here's where it started to shift. There were little inconsistencies. One day she said she had a sister who lived abroad. The next week she said she was an only child. She once told me her family was from Morocco. Then later she mentioned having Irish grandparents and made a joke about being pale enough to disappear in snow. None of it was major, but when you line up the little things, they start looking bigger. And then there was the voice thing. She never sent voice notes. Ever. I asked once if she wanted to leave one, and she said she hated how she sounded recorded. Said she sounded like a teenage frog with anxiety. I let go. But then one night, I said something about being in a weird mood, and she called me. Just rang out of nowhere. I picked up. She hung up instantly. I texted, accident. And she said, yeah, sorry, that was muscle memory, lol. Weird, but okay. That same night, I Googled her name. Nothing. No socials, not even a private Instagram. The number wasn't linked to anything. Reverse searched the photos. One came up on a forum for photography presets. Not a profile. A stock style post like testing out a new lens on my friend. That was the moment it hit me. I didn't even know who I was talking to. I've been telling someone about my insecurities, what I was like as a kid, how I get weirdly emotional watching videos of old people dancing, and they weren't even real. Or they weren't who they said they were. I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted to see if she'd trip up again. She did. Said she went to a concert over the weekend. I asked which venue. She said one that had closed last year. I waited, said nothing. She changed the subject fast, like faster than usual. A few days later, I sent her a message. Said something like, hey, can I ask something super random? Are you actually who you say you are? She took hours to respond. Then she said, I knew you were going to ask eventually. I said, so who are you? Long pause. Then she said, not Yasmin. That was it. No name, no details. Just not Yasmin. I said, are you a real person at all? She said, yeah, just not the girl in the pictures. I asked why. Why go through all that? Why talk to me every day like we were building something real? She said she was bored. Said she made the account because she wanted to see if she could pull it off. Said she picked a name, a face, and just started talking to people. That most guys got creepy and she unmatched them, but I was different. That it made her laugh. That was actually easy to talk to. She said, I didn't mean to keep it going this long, but you were fun, like, actually fun. It was a guy, some dude, never told me his real name. Just said he wasn't trying to scam me or anything. Just wanted something to do. That talking to me made his nights feel less empty, and that he didn't think I'd ever find out. I didn't even know what to say. I wasn't heartbroken, just numb. Like I'd been in a room having what felt like real conversation, and then the lights came on and the room was fake. cardboard walls, nothing behind them. I blocked the number, deleted the chat, but I still hear some of her messages in my head. The way she said certain things, the specific way she asked questions. That wasn't AI. That was someone real, just not the person I thought. Sometimes I wonder what kind of guy does that. Not out of revenge or lust or even money, but just boredom. Like it was something to pass the time. A little game, a project. Aspen never existed. And I was still stupid enough to miss her anyway.